Okay, folks, ready? So we get going?
Yep. The news we back on that. Okay, let's get started. So on behalf of Uncle Paul, you're most welcome to our event today. And my name is Eamon Wall, and I'm the Smurfit-Stone Professor of Irish Studies here on campus. And we have this big banner now, so if I forget my position, I can just read it. But that was not the reason why the Uncle Global invested in the banner. So you are most welcome here today to this event, which is at the beginning of the celebration of the St. Patrick's Day and all the parts of our heritage that are so important and so vital to us. A special thanks to everybody for coming today. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful again to have live music and live programming on campus. Eileen and Robert did a performance for us from the focal point during COVID in 2021, and it was fantastic. But we wanted them to come back because it was so good. We wanted to be able to have it live again. So we are thrilled that they're here. The event today is also being live streamed, so there's a bit more equipment around than usual. So that's why Bob told me to stand up here, so that I could appear on them. And a special thanks to Bob L in the corner. Bob put all our programming together for Omson Global. We've been doing it for a number of years, and we could not survive without him. So thank you, Bob. And also to Leanna Constantine, who's our executive director, for helping us with all of our programming and for all of our support as well. Our program today will run for about the performance will run for about 45 and 50 minutes, and then at the end you'll have time for question and answers with the musicians. And so now I'm just going to read the formal part of my introduction so that I won't go off the rails. As we all know, for a long time, the St. Louis region has played an outside role in American music. We are the city of Josephine Baker, Miles Davis, Chuck Berry, John Hartford, to name but a few. We are world renowned for music and proud of it. Today, St. Louis is a hometown of some of the greatest talents in Irish music and also Irish American music. We have many schools of Irish dance, and also St. Louis Irish Arts, the largest school for music and dance in North America. And this year, our April festival at Chanel celebrates its 25th anniversary. with its programming in April. Today, we celebrate this with two wonderful musicians who are returning to play for us again. Robert Ryan and Eileen Gannon are traditional Irish musicians who have been performing together since meeting at the Catskills Irish Arts Week in upstate New York several years ago. Eileen and Robert are both born to Irish immigrant parents growing up in St. Louis and London, respectively. And of course, during this week, this period of St. Patrick's Day, we are honoring St. Patrick, but we're also very conscious of the diaspora to which we all belong. Eileen is the music director of St. Louis Irish Arts, and Robert is also one of the school's three fiddle instructors. Eileen and Robert regularly play concerts together in St. Louis and have performed together across the USA, UK, Ireland, and in many, many international countries. And when they played for us before, they were celebrating their new album of Down the Rocky Road, which is a wonderful CD. This recording draws inspiration from Petrie's Complete Irish Music, a publication featuring over 1,500 tunes collected in Ireland between 1850 and 1860 in the Slieve Loughborough region. And if you hear that CD, it's one of the most interesting and wonderful recordings of Irish music. So without further ado, it's a great honor and a great privilege to welcome back to UMSL Robert Ryan and Eileen Gannon. Thanks.
tunes from the Petrie collection. George Petrie was what would have been called an antiquarian at the time. He was a gentleman of independent means, shall we say, and he spent his time collecting, in particular, tunes from traditional musicians in the post-famine period. So his collection of music is a very, very important snapshot in time of the kind of immediate aftermath of the disaster of the famine years, and obviously a huge amount of Irish music would have been lost during that time. A huge amount of Irish music also would have been brought across to the States in that period as well, and there's a huge amount of influence in various regions of traditional American fiddling and American music. A lot of that came with people who emigrated during that period. The first tune is called The Goodfellows, and we play it as kind of a march, but it's actually a type of tune called a slip jig, which is in 9/8 time. For those of you who are musicians, it's not a very common time signature, and it's one of the few types of tunes that is very much indigenous to Ireland. We're going to claim those ones for our own. The second tune is called the Frieze Breeches, which is the frieze was a type of fabric that was very a coarse woolen cloth that was very popular amongst the rural agricultural classes in Ireland. It's very hard wearing and warm fabric. And the last tune we learned, Eileen is vegetarian, and we had to learn a tune called the Cauliflower Jig. As David mentioned, we recorded an album that's the first track on our CD, and we actually put that together. We started putting it together just before the pandemic hit, and after a number of full starts and cancellations, we finally managed to get it completed. So we spent a lot of lockdown working on that. So someone in one of our audiences away somewhere said that we should have called it the Petri dish. So that was one of the main sources of material for our album, and the other main source, Eamon mentioned again, was the Slieve-Rookery region in Ireland, which is in southwest Munster, where the counties of Cork, Kerry, and Limerick all meet around the River Blackwater. And it's a very small area which has an incredible wealth of traditional music going back to the late 18th century. There's a particular style of playing from there, which I'm very fond of. So our two kind of main sources of inspiration were the old collection where I was reading sheet music, and then kind of trying to bring it to life, what I know about Irish music, what I've learned about how it sounds, and then trying to take what's on page and kind of inject it with that kind of feeling. There's no way, of course, of knowing exactly how people played Irish music in the 1850s, 1860s when this was collected. So there's a certain amount of imagination involved in bringing these tunes back to life. There's no right or wrong way. We kind of decided, we came up with a few tricks that we wanted to try and make the music sound less modern, without it sounding perhaps too grating. So I mean, the harp obviously helps a lot there. There's not much that's very grating about the harp. So we'll carry on with a selection of tunes from the other source of inspiration. These tunes, the first two of these tunes, I heard on an LP from the 1970s. 1970s were a great period for collecting music and recording music. There was a huge boom in recorded music in the 1970s, and there was a great company in London called Topic Records, and they recorded a huge number of older players from Ireland, and so they saved some great music for us. And these two first tunes come from an LP that was put together, I think, in the early 1970s. And then the last one is an old clan march, which at some point or other got polka-fied and turned into a dance tune. favourite tune from Schlieblucher is the slide, which is a kind of a jig, but it's hard to describe. People say, what's the difference between a normal Irish jig and a slide? Well, a slide is what you dance a slide to. It's a little bit self-referential. A lot of these slides, these particular slides we're about to play actually come from West Limerick, And there's a lot of cultural connection between West Limerick and Clare, because across the Shannon estuary, it's a lot easier in Ireland in the past to travel by boat around the coastal areas than to go inland. So a lot of places were connected by fishing communities were connected across the estuary there in the Shannon. So there's a lot of influence of Clare music in West Limerick. So it's a little bit different, but it shares a lot of similar repertoire. A lot of the slides would have originally been Scottish strathspeys. The British Army garrisons that were put in place in what they call the troublesome regions. The British thought it would be a good idea to bring Highland regiments from Scotland and station them. Well, these people are from far away, and they won't have anything in common. Of course, the problem is they were also Catholic and they were also Gaelic speakers, and clearly there was a lot of cultural crossover, because after that period we had huge numbers of tunes of Scottish influence come into the repertoire of the music from around there. So I am imagining that after lights out and everything was secure, I'd say a few of the Highland pipers and fiddle players probably popped over the wall and made their way down to the local shebeen, and eventually ended up playing some tunes, and the rest is history. So as much as they thought they were they thought that they were pulling a fast one, they weren't really very successful. So we'll carry on with these. We don't really have a name for these. John Joe Hartnett is the player that these came from, so they are known as John Joe Hartnett slides. more tunes from Petri collection. The first one is called The Song of Una. George Petri had some very, it comes across in his writing as, what's a nice way of putting it, a little bit stiff. Some of his editorial notes are quite funny. There's one in particular. He comes across a tune, and he says to note to his editor saying, "Do not include. This one is too Scotch." And it's not at all. It's very, very clearly an Irish tune, but he was very, very particular. He talks about how this is an inferior setting of this tune, and he says the Song of Una very ancient, and how he came to that conclusion we will never know. But anyway, we'll take his word for it. The second one is called the Fairy Troop. These are all marches. Marches were very, very popular in the late 18th, early 19th century. Any of you who have studied any Western European history from that period will know that it was a time of great volatility, and people were very much into forming militias and paramilitary forces, and Ireland was very much part of that cultural trend. So marches were very popular because people liked to get together and march from place to place and demonstrate and get into fights and stuff like that. So there was a cultural phenomenon at the end of the 18th century, early 19th century in Ireland called faction fighting, and it was very much political differences were often settled at the end of a big stick. And I mean, this is a pretty serious thing. I mean, there were, in terms of the most violent recorded event, faction fight, took place down in Kerry, actually, and there were about this estimate between 3,000 to 5,000 people involved, and there were 200 fatalities over a period of 3 days. So these people weren't messing around. So this final tune in the set is called the Shanavest and Corabaka faction tune, and it would have been a march. It would have had words as well, and it would have probably been lyrics extolling the virtues of one particular faction over the other, and talking about what terrible people the others were and how they were going to get 7 bells leathered out of them. So the Shanavest and Corabaka, two factions. They were essentially, one was a nationalist, a middle-class nationalist organization, and then the other was essentially an agrarian radical organization, and they had very different conceptions of the way that politics should exist in Ireland. And you can imagine, when we'll get through these first two tunes, they're kind of smooth, beautiful, mellow pieces of music, and then you get into the last one, you can hear it's very, very martial. So close your eyes, imagine a bunch of people from rural parts of Ireland and a bunch of people from urban parts of Ireland meeting together. The clash of the ash. The Song of Una, the Fairy Troop, and the Shanavest and Corabaka.
You can remember all about them, though.
I know all the useless information, how it actually goes.
That's right.
It's pretty. 1, 2, 3. another song, but this is actually a song. The Song of Repentance. It was originally composed in Irish by Owen Roa O'Sullivan. He was actually a poet from Sliabh. There's our Sliabh connection there. And he composed this tune, this song, using a very, very popular classical Irish idiom. And he kind of subverted it. It's a particular type of song of repentance. It's a type of song. The narrator is on their deathbed and they are listing their sins in repentance. Owen Roy Sullivan was notorious as a rake. He had to move around many times because he was caught in the wrong bed, shall we say. And he composed this song, and now, of course, it's meant to be in the idiom of a song of repentance, but that's perhaps more of a brag. So let's see. Well, it's and it was composed in Irish in the 18th century, and then this English translation was made by Frank O'Connor, a poet and translator. I think it was in the 1940s. And let's see. Well, you've already this is your glossary. There will be a test afterwards. Glossary. I've already explained faction fighting. I guess the only other thing in this, perhaps, thimble. Maybe it's worked that out. It's not something you see so much anymore, but you used to see it in big cities. Get it in London, New York. 3 cups and a ball or a dice, right? And it's moved around. And of course, it's a trick. You don't ever win money. Sleight of hand. So a thimbleman is, it used to be thimbles and a small dice. So he talks about thimblemen. So that's what thimblemen are. Tipplers, people who drink. Faction fighting. I think that's the full glossary. That should be the whole lot. Oh, what can I say of a playboy's behavior? Have I not caught it all over the place? Up bragging and boasting and coaxing the maidens, increasing their love with the strength of my kiss, and practicing plainly my versification, for to lead their young thoughts from the duties of home, by which they were led into sad situations. The clergy declares they had best leave alone. Now my time has been time sadly wasted on thimblemen, tipplers, and gay maids of scorn. I have sat by a candle and rhymed myself naked with jeers that I made and great oaths that I swore. And day in, day out, all the wealth of my station away upon master musicians I've thrown. And what they played to me I heard revelation, not dreaming that they too were best left alone. But alas, it is true that most furious of creatures, my creditors, all with their warrants have come, and they swore on their souls that they'll put me in prison, and now I am poor and ill-clad and undone. Not one of those honey-mouthed girls that betrayed me or robbed me, pretending that she was my own, but mocks me with hurt and outlandish behavior, to show me too late she was best left alone. Now weakness assails me and old age draws nigh me, and I have not wealth or good clothes or red gold. I'm awakened each morning by tremblings and aching,
My songs are no more the delight of the bow. To speak with a girl would be more consolation, and so I must leave the gay tavern alone. I admit and I swear, and I make protestation, 'twas all a damn trade that was best left alone. Now let every proud, high-stepping, mirth-making hero who hungers for ladies and craves for the drink be set by now and go cautious and careful, for fear his old age into darkness might slip. And let him spurn hesitation and marry a lady of prudence and piety, wit and good tone, and leave faction fighting and such recreation. He can take it from me, they were best left alone.
Well, we haven't played any of the most popular kind of tune in Ireland. Funnily enough, we didn't actually play any reels on the album either. Everyone thought it was a deliberate choice, and it actually was more of just pandemic stretched our recording out so long. We went into the studio, and studio engineer got COVID, and then we went on lockdown, and then I think we got COVID, and at the end of all of this, I managed to put a real big cut in my right index finger, which meant I couldn't play anymore for several months. So we decided that the album had enough tunes to finish up. And that's why we don't have any reels on the recording. It was not a deliberate choice, but if people want to believe that, then that's so we'll carry on with a set of reels. We'll play some Schlieblucher reels here, the Banks of the Island and the Scargiglin reel, two East Kerry tunes.
whole separate tradition of Irish harp music composed by harpers. And there was a great big festival in Belfast called the Belfast Harp Festival. And there was 1792. There's my historian of the years for me. And there was a collector there named Edward Fontaine, and he collected all tunes performed at the festival by ear and wrote them down as he heard them and released a big collection. And without that collection, we would have lost all of that music as well. So it's an amazing thing that he did. That what an ear he must have had to produce such work.
And there were really only a handful, like what, a dozen traditional harpers left in Ireland at that point. The tradition had
Very much died.
yeah, through erosion and prohibition to a certain extent. But yeah, there were only a handful left at all. So we almost kind of lost every aspect of that part of the tradition.
So this is the piece called Lady Ivy.
Finish up with a set of hop jigs, which are kind of, again, another 9/8 time signature tune. They're very similar to slip jigs. They have kind of disappeared from the main repertoire. There is one Irish dancer actually based here in the States on the East Coast who has been doing some research into the dance form of these tunes, and she has uncovered some old dance master manuscripts. There's a very small handful of us, I would say, that 5 people in the world who are interested in trying to bring these tunes back into the dancing tradition. And we've actually, one of our cohort has actually just moved to St. Louis. Piper has just moved from Detroit, so we're starting to pack the ranks with hop jig aficionados These three tunes come from the Petrie collection again. The first one is it's an old English melody called Dusty Miller. The second tune is called Ride a Mile, which is actually a slip jig that I turned into a hop jig for. And then the last tune is called The Rocky Road to Dublin, Down the Rocky Road to Dublin. It's a pretty well-known song, one of the few hop jig, slip jig, time signature songs. And that's where we got the title actually of our album, Down the Rocky Road. So we will finish up with these three hop jigs on the Petrie collection.
And we'll take your questions.
Oh,
I'll start thinking.
And then the test will administer the test.
And we do have CDs available as well.
Thank you.
anyone have any questions? Yes.
I really appreciated hearing the history of this along the music.
That's it.
And then what was the date when the art collection was made, before the art was on?
Collected in 1792 and
Yeah, I think it was a few years after it, yeah. So the piece that Eileen played, the piece that we played there, Lady Ivy, it was composed by a harper called Thomas Cannella, who 1640 to 1698 is his lifespan. So he so the piece that was collected by, I can't remember who was playing, the names of the musicians is also written down in the collection there. But you know, he was playing a piece of music that had been composed 100 years before, at least. You know, we wouldn't, you know, some of these compositions, they weren't necessarily writing this music down. You know, one of the features of harping at the time was that many harpers were blind. So they wouldn't have been in a position to write sheet music down, even if they were from a literate culture, which many of them weren't. So the only way that these tunes are handed down was through, you know, the oral tradition, the oral tradition, if you will. So, you know, I mean, it's not a very healthy way to think, but if you think about what has been saved, the tiny percentage of what's been saved, and then the vast amount that was lost. You know, and even in the Bunting collection, Bunting was he even a harper?
no, he was a pianist.
Or
So a few of them he decided to do his own arrangement of pieces as well, and they wouldn't be playable on harp at all. They're very.
I think the first publication was actually harp tunes arranged for piano forte, or was it with Stevie Harp School? So yeah, they didn't, and he didn't collect the bass. He only collected the notation of one hand. So we still don't know how harpers in that period would have actually been accompanying themselves with the other hand.
So we just did a lot of guessing, or I did a lot of guessing.
Yeah, so
Arranging it.
it's even it's
I mean,
an
700
extensive
pages.
collection, but it's still only a partial collection, a partial glimpse of what would actually be in place. So
So they see that in.
What's the effect when you change those silver
Yep.
pegs either before you play or during you play?
So it's the same effect either way, and it's just like going from a white key to a black key, you know, so it's a C to a C sharp. I can only have one or the other. I
Okay.
can't have them.
And
So,
sometimes you have them all, I'll say down, almost all.
yep, so that was just to put it into a flat key. So when I put them down, it lowers them. So I put down as many flats as I need or as many sharps as I need to put up. Set it up in the key I needed it. And then sometimes we change keys when we put two tunes together, and I'll have to change it.
and we're not necessarily following the kinds of scales that we would be familiar with in Western art music. This music, we're playing music that is kind of coming at the end of a much older tradition. Western art music, classical music, whatever you want to call it, it's very modern in comparison to the origins of this music. So we're actually using scales, modes that don't exist in Northwestern European art music at all, really. There are often, I mean, I suppose you have it in certain minor scales where there's, I don't know, for those of you who are not music theoreticians, this might be a little bit annoying, but so a lot of the scales we use in this older music, they have a series of notes going up the scale is not the same as the notes coming down the scale. So, for example, some of the tunes that we play in G,
the marches there kind of had it in there, but some of the tunes you play, what would it be like? And then so you're going kind of major on the way down and minor on the way up here. So but these rules have mostly been lost in modern traditional Irish music, but where you will find them is in songs. If you're familiar with traditional Irish songs, there are certain notes that change going up or down the scale. And when you hear them sung out of order, you will immediately be able to recognize that's not right, that doesn't sound right, that doesn't follow the musical pattern that I expect from these types of songs. So that's where this older tradition has been retained in the music, is in the singing tradition, and then in a handful of these older tunes.
The way the kind of collective consciousness of what sounds right in music changes over time. I did a project recently where I was doing medieval music, which all of that sounded completely wrong to my ear because that's just not what I used to hear. But it took a lot of playing through to sort of accept the weird scale of things.
And it's a problem in music theory, in that Western art music theory assumes a universality that is not accurate. It is making certain assumptions about kind of absolute values that are actually culturally relative. So, you know, there are certain types of music where you can try to apply classical music theory, there's just great big gaping holes in it. And Irish music is one of those. I think kind of, you know, 20th century African-American music is similar. We share certain notes in scales tend to be what in blues or jazz are called blue notes, and they have shifting values, you know, depending on what effect you're trying to create. They will be sharp or flat. That doesn't really fall. You can't play those notes on piano, you know, so you either have to skip those notes or not play that music.
I have to skip them. They also are.
Yeah. So, you know, there are a number of different notes that fall between those absolute values that are, particularly in the fiddle tradition. Let me give you a quick example. So in the second part of this tune, I have 3 different types of F that I'll be playing. So we've got so 3 notes in the space of 1 tone. That's not something that you can really incorporate into a working music theory when it comes to like classical stuff. So you just really, there's no way of notating it. Yeah, exactly. You know, so if you were to transcribe Irish music accurately, it would be so utterly complex as to be worthless, because the note values are all approximate, the pitch values are approximate. There's no way of really noting it without it becoming
The
this.
rhythm is extremely.
Yeah, there's no way of really doing it without making it utterly meaningless. Yes, question back.
Can you get, or is it possible to get any hints or possibilities from Seamus singers?
Yeah, absolutely.
And to incorporate the lost
Yeah.
portions?
Absolutely. You know, I would say that so for those of you who don't know, the term sean-nós is an Irish term. It just means old style, and it's an unaccompanied style of singing, and it's very, very melodically complex. It's very bendy, and it uses half tones, 8 quarter, 8 tones, all kinds of bending notes, and very complicated forms of ornamentation. Again, almost impossible to know. But yes, the singing tradition, I would say the singing tradition is the absolute core of Irish music. To understand Irish music, you really need to try to understand
the place of singing in Irish music, we're going back to, you know, we played music there from the 19th century, 18th century, all the way back to the 17th century. Back then, the song tradition would have been absolutely central to nearly everybody's lives. You know, it would have been one of the main forms of artistic expression available to people. And that's one of the reasons why it's so complex. But one of the things I think is I came to understand from the Petrie collection, there's many tunes in there that are written down march or jig, march or polka, so people were taking melodies and rearranging the melody into a different time signature. And one of the reasons for that is there are different types of dances. So you can take a melody and then you can stretch the long notes and short notes, create a different pattern so that it will fit into a different time signature. Again, I'll just give you a demonstration, it's easier. A slide that I decided was going to be a fun reel, and I turned it into a reel. And then I found out afterwards that someone else had already done this, and it was already in the repertoire as a different reel. Now my second part is better than the first. But so I just play the first part, so it's easy for you to hear. So you can hear that they're the same melody, they're following the same pattern, but pushed into a different rhythmic form. So if you think about people, musicians, even people who weren't necessarily musicians, didn't have an instrument necessarily, but singers, you know, lilting was a very important part of the dance tradition as well. If people didn't have an instrument, you could still dance to mouth music. You know, that's another one of the commonalities between Irish music and Scottish music. In traditional Scottish music, they have what is called Porch de Bail, which just means music of the mouth. And it's retained a much stronger place in traditional Highland music, music from Cape Breton as well. But it still exists in Ireland in the form of lilting. And like even my father said that when he was growing up, you know, when there'd be a dance, which usually would take place in someone's house at that time, you know, there might be, you know, they might be waiting for the musicians to turn up, and in the meantime, someone else who knew the music, didn't play an instrument, would lilt the tunes. And if you have a couple of people doing that at the same time, you have enough volume for people to dance to. So that's, you know, that's a really important way of looking at Irish music. You do really have to go back to the Sean-Nós. Yes, you had a question.
Is it possible to create a modern instrument that would incorporate those so-called laws?
That's why
They perfected it in the 17th century and it hasn't changed. This hasn't changed since the 1600s.
I think somebody has been trying for years to create that effect on the harp, but it's not.
So for the hardware, those things would have cost.
Right, well, the harp didn't originally play that quick dance music, it was completely separate
Oh, I didn't know.
until, say, the 1960s.
It's neat to hear the harp, but I think the harp is very nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, what I do along with him playing the fast music is a very kind of new style of accompanying, kind of like, you know.
And this is actually a very modern instrument as well. People make it. No. It's function because of the shape of the harp, and the way that the harp is being incorporated into the kind of iconography of Ireland. You know, the Ireland being the only nation in the world that has a musical instrument as its the symbol of the nation. But this actual instrument, it was really only invented late 19th, early 20th century. What was the guy's name?
Shocking. Right, she's failed the tests. Then you have to mark that down.
Thanks with me when I forget something. Students, when I was doing it.
Yeah.
Not the right answer nowadays. So, what a fantastic performance. As I said at the outset, we have these wonderful musicians in St. Louis, some of the best musicians in the world in our music are living here among us now. It's wonderful and mesmerizing just to listen to it and to watch them and see them up close. And so, and also the question, we've always had the question and answers after our events. And I suppose we should do that at the university, right? We should always have questions, so, and so not only did we get a wonderful performance today, from Robert and Eileen, but also we got a lecture or a series of lectures into the tradition. So I'm so thrilled on behalf of UMSL Global that we were able to host this event today. And so thankful, as always, to everybody for turning out today. We never take your support for granted. So just if we could have a final round of applause for.
Thanks everyone for coming out. Thanks to Eamon for inviting us, and thank you for the wonderfully refreshing, intelligent, informed questions. Always something that gives me great pleasure, and an excuse for me to let some of the vast quantities of useless information I have stored in my brain, so that I doesn't have to listen to me go on about it. Oh, yeah.
So you said it's apart from the violin, you also in the other, like traditional Irish instruments, or you incorporate that into your.
Sometimes I incorporate the concertina, which if you've ever seen a Popeye cartoon, that's the instrument. Little octagonal kind of mini accordion, it used to be called the ladies accordion. It was predominantly a women's instrument back in the day. And I dabble.
And I play a little bit of the tin whistle. I don't actually have one with me right now, but the tin whistle would be, I would consider it. I mean, we teach Irish music at St. Louis Irish Arts, and we start all the students start off with a whistle. It's affordable, it's relatively straightforward to play, and it's a great introduction to the music. And traditionally, and that's following a very traditional pedagogical format within the Irish music world. Everybody starts on the whistle and squawks away on that until they either despair of, or we despair, and there are certain instruments you don't necessarily, you kind of, some instruments require a little bit more musicality than others. Fiddle is very forgiving. It's certain instruments that you press a button and the right sound comes out. That works better for certain people. If you have issues with recognizing pitch and stuff, you can't play this. But so yeah, we all began on the tin whistle. So nearly every traditional Irish musician plays the whistle to some degree or another. So that would definitely be the main instrument, I would say. Probably the most important instrument in terms of the continuation of Irish music. Is very affordable. You could learn some music, and then if you really, it winnows the wheat from the chaff. That someone who falls in love with the music on the whistle is going to be a better candidate for then moving on to an instrument that requires more dedication, shall we say. So that was, I had no choice learning the fiddle. I learned the whistle, and then Brendan Mulcair, who is a very important educator and kind of stalwart of the Irish music scene in London, he said that I had an ear for music and therefore I was required to play fiddle. I could play flute. I wasn't allowed. So, and at the time I was a little bit upset about it, but now I'm really glad that was just the way it was. Hi.
All right, thank you.